Howdy, Dr. Margaret here, and I promise that today we are going to wrap up this goal number one on the history, future, and causes of autism and the current research. I just want to recap what we covered previously in the last couple sessions. We talked about the three main areas of research in autism, where they're zoning into the biological, the social, and the environmental as potential causes. One thing that we talked about was how they believe the biological is a huge contributor. We talked about Fragile X and Fragile X, where those individuals also have autism, and how it is showing maybe something that's protecting girls. And then we also talked about Williams syndrome. Remember that? That was the opposite of autism, and we talked about the kids with Williams syndrome who are missing a string of genes on chromosome 7, and then the children with autism who have duplicates of that exact same string of genes, and how they're looking for a light switch. Then we talked about the social, and we talked about disparities in populations. And then we talked about that death stare study. Remember the little boy and the girl in the wagon, where he gets frustrated at her opening and closing the door and gives her the death stare, and how the audience, which was a combination of autistic individuals and non-autistic individuals, they found a difference that the people who did not have autism were really focused on that little boy's social exchange of him giving her the death stare, whereas the people with autism were focused on the door handle and the door opening and closing on the wagon. All right, so today we're going to get into the last piece, which is the environmental. All right, first of all, let's cover some statistics. Now, I got these statistics from the CDC. Remember earlier we did a little exercise where you went to the CDC as homework and explored there a little bit and brought back some information. I love the graphs. I mean, you can just get a ton of cool graphs and information. They're easy to look at to understand a little bit more about what's going on with autism. And they keep them current at the CDC. So it's fun to look at. So this is one graph where they show that prevalence of the reporting of autism has changed over time. So if you take a look at along the bottom of that graph, you'll see the years, and they run this through 2016. And then that was really the latest big study that they did on autism, ended in 2016. They need a new one. So, and then along the left column, you'll see its percentage of children that are diagnosed. So it's per 1,000 children. So as you can see by the graph, easy to look at, that the prevalence has gone upward over time. Just stop and think about it for a moment. Why do you think the reasons are that has increased over time? More fabulous data from that study in 2016. This is data concerning the prevalence rates and how they vary by sex. So out of 1,000 children, the overall rate of autism was 18.5%. And of that, 29% were boys, 6.9% were girls. For every 4.3 boys that were diagnosed with autism, one girl was diagnosed. Big disparity there. More fabulous data from that same 2016 study. This one, they're looking at how the prevalence rates vary by race and ethnicity. So interesting that this whole graph is framed around Hispanic. If you look at that purple line on the bottom, that's the Hispanic line. And as you can see, they have the lowest prevalence rates. And then above that, the green line on the top is white, and they frame it as non-Hispanic white. And then the blue line underneath that is the Black population, and they frame it as non-Hispanic Black. And then the orange is Asian Pacific Islanders, which they're also pretty low, but not as low as the Hispanic population. So very interesting to wonder why the Hispanic population has such low rates of autism. Concerning environmental, I want to talk just a moment about pocketing. So I also want to focus in on just that population of people with the diagnosis of autism who have it for reasons of genetic liability. Remember how we talked about up to 75% of the people they believe have autism for reasons of genetics. So they believed that a portion of those people are just inheriting those markers from their parents, and they believe that another portion of those people with that genetic liability get it through a gene mutation. So just a little slip up, something that happens in the genes at birth, a little defect happens. So we're focusing in on genetic liability, and so we're focusing in on the biological here, right? So there appears to be a biological and an environmental correlation, and it shows up in pockets across the United States. So what I mean by that is that if you were to take a huge map and put it on the wall of the United States and take a bunch of little push pins in and put them in the map and show where everyone who has a genetic liability, put a little push pin in that map for everyone that's reported to have that genetic liability, you would find that there's areas of concentration. There's certain areas where there's huge prevalences of these people. I want you to just think about that for a moment and think about why. Why would there be areas in the United States of America where we have large amounts of people, or concentrated amounts of people, let's put it that way, diagnosed with autism in those particular areas? We're going to take a little pause and think about that. Maybe talk about that with the family trainer. What are the reasons? Why might that be happening? What do you think? Oh, and you know someone has done that. You know someone has taken that map and they've put the push pins in it. And here it is. What is going on? Look at those concentrated red areas. Why is there huge concentrations in certain areas? Yellow is a little higher concentration than orange, than red. What is going on? What do those areas have in common? Why we would have large amounts of people diagnosed with autism? So I know what some of your answers were to that, because I know what has been highly researched. So it's very likely that some of the things that came to mind for you that could be reasons why, or maybe you thought about the difference in diets. I mean, different population types have different diets. Maybe you thought, is there pollution in those areas? I mean, they look like they're in large city areas, maybe industrial pollution, stuff like that. And then just large population areas. I mean, if you have larger populations, you're going to have more diagnosis, right? And then you probably wondered something about like poverty. Are they living in poverty and it could be affecting the diagnosis rates? Maybe like prenatal stuff. Do the moms have access to WIC and proper nutrition and stuff like that? Um, you might have wondered about like their access to healthcare in general. I mean, do they have good healthcare there? If you have better healthcare, maybe you can get into doctors and get diagnosis, and maybe you don't if you don't have great access to healthcare. And on that note, you might have wondered a little bit about that illegal immigration piece. Are they going to the doctors and getting diagnosed? Um, and are these areas of large concentrations of immigrants? So, maybe all of those play into it. I know some of what you think it might have been, but I just want to point out to you that our pocket in Michigan is in Farmington Hills. Farmington Hills. Have you been to Farmington Hills? Farmington Hills is a fairly affluent area. It's not highly industrial. It's there's a lot of offices and businesses there, but it's not like huge factory area or highly polluted area or anything like that. Basically people are eating well there, and it's because it's a fairly affluent area. It's not like grossly dense in terms of population, and there's some amazing healthcare there. So it's also a fairly white area, so there's not large concentrations of illegal immigrants and stuff like that. So it's very interesting that in Michigan, our pocket is in Farmington Hills. So this is just that same pocketing map. I just produced it in another type of visual here for you. But, I want you to think about something for a minute. When we think about the causes of autism and we think about, diets and pollution and industrial and large population areas maybe being contributors, poverty, do we get good prenatal care, access to WIC and good diet during prenatal stuff, access to health care, illegal immigration concentrations and stuff like that. I think that we think of those things as potential reasons why we might see pocketing because we tend to look at autism as a disease. And what I want to leave you with today is I want to leave you with a question. What would happen if we were to stop looking at autism as a disease? What if we just started looking at it as a different way to process? So, what if we were the ones to adjust instead of constantly trying to make the autistic be normal and fit into our expectations? What if we just adjusted and allowed them to be who they were? How would that change the condition of life for autistic people? Well, congratulations. You just finished up goal 1 of our 6 primary learning goals, the history, future, and causes of autism and what the research shows us. Our next section is going to be on the 3 pillars of autism. You're going to learn about the 3 pillars of autism, which are communication, socialization, and stereotypy. So, looking forward to that.